everyone. Fabulous to have you here. Love to leave just a few minutes here. It's really good to I think I've mentioned this every single video tutorial I've run, but I love this bit of the webinar. I love being able to see people come into the room, to see some familiar faces. I get the joy, I'm not sure if you do or not, but I get the joy of being able to see some of the names in the room. Dave Vinograd, fabulous to see you here, Dave. Thank you so much for coming along. Keith Newman, good to have you here again as well. Awesome. Tina Akers. Very good. We've got some familiar people in the room already. No worries at all, Dave. I want to point out to you, Dave, you're already using one of the functions of the video tutorial, which is to put your hand up. I'm not sure if you're meaning that. So I'm going to give you a moment before I thoroughly embarrass you to put your hand down if that's what you want to do. But if you've got something you want to say, we can unmute you and allow you to talk, but I will give you just a minute. Keith, thank you for reading the book. I really appreciate it. Oh, Dave put his hand up for Richmond. That's nice. Go the Tigers. We're going okay at the moment. We're going okay. Not too disappointed with them. Chantel, good to have you here. Denise. Lorraine, good to have you here. I've sent you an email this afternoon, actually, Lorraine. All right, fabulous. All right, so I think we've let enough people into the room right now. So thank you. I really appreciate you. I feel like I've got to do that standard thing where I say I really appreciate you coming along to this afternoon's video tutorial, but that's probably not where my heart lies. I think my heart really lies in appreciating that you're the sort of leader that might want to implement restorative practice as well in your school. That's the bit that has me excited about you being here. The notion that you might decide that today is a turning point for your school. The notion that you might decide that tomorrow you're going to start the journey of implementing restorative practices. That excites me deeply because I know how many people are going to benefit from that turning point, from you turning that corner. I know that for me, and I wrote this in a blog that I sent out on Sunday, I wrote that for me, the decision to be a restorative practitioner, and then I guess probably the one that came above that, the decision to be a restorative leader, to lead a restorative school. I think above all of the plethora of decisions, and I often talk about the school leaders, the decisional fatigue that we can experience, that every day is just full of so many choices and decisions that need to be made. I think that the most important one I ever made was the decision that I would lead a restorative school. And like I said, it's because of the stakeholders. I know that it reached students who would not have been otherwise reached. I know that in my first principalship at Ludmilla Primary School in the Northern Territory, that our restorative work had some kids access an education who would not have otherwise accessed an education. I'm so proud and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to practice restoratively with those students. I know that there have been teachers that I've led, teachers who I've helped and mentored into leadership roles, who have become principals, who have become APs, because of their decision to be restorative with me. And again, I'm just so grateful and incredibly proud and in awe of those individuals. And I know also that there are parents in schools that I work with now, as well as schools that I've previously been a leader at, who have abandoned toxic and adversarial relationships with their school because their school decided to be restorative. And that's years long sometimes of that addiction to being adversarial with each other. That gets left behind in the moment that they get heard. One of our schools recently, a senior secondary school, ran a formal conference, and we're talking a little bit about them lately because I'm really just impressed that they had a go at it. And some parents of year 10 students, said that this was the first time that the school ever brought them in and asked them what they thought when something went wrong. And I think that that's remarkable, and that parent I know was so grateful. So today is a lesson in how you can get those kind of benefits for your school, how you can make that ambition and those outcomes a reality for you and for your organisation. It's worthy. It's worth deciding that this is what I want, and it's worth starting that journey tomorrow. So I am thrilled and excited to be bringing some of the detail, some of the things that I've learned across a really long career now in school leadership to you today. And I hope that we can be of benefit and make today a genuine turning point for you. There's always the possibility, though, that you'll treat today like a TV show. So I don't want you to. I want you to participate if you like. I want you to know that you can put your hand up. I want you to, and we can have a chat about something as we go. I want you to know that you can use the chat box. And that we can, I'll stop occasionally. It's not a TV show. It's not pre-recorded. I will stop occasionally and have a little look at the chat box and just see if there's any comments or questions there that I need to attend to. But if you are going to treat it like a TV show and you're going to nod off shortly, I'll do my best to prevent that. But if you are going to nod off shortly, there's something that I need you to take with you before we start. And that is that I don't want you to step into practicing restoratively unless you mean it. I don't want you to take an approach that might be, we're going to be a little bit half pregnant when it comes to our approach to restorative practices. I don't want you to leave today's webinar and say, oh, well, actually, I quite like this. I think we'll implement a little bit of restorative practices in our school. I don't want you to make that mistake because it is, if you decide to bolt it onto your school, if you decide to do a little bit of restorative practices, you decide to aim for being half pregnant, one is you never get the baby. You just never get that wonderful outcome that some of which I've outlined in the introduction to this afternoon. And it's incompatible with some of the things that are already happening in your school. So you may already have systems of control, systems of authority in your school. You may have practitioners in your school who are very wed philosophically and practically to notions of behaving and teaching adversarially. Crime and punishment. There has to be a consequence. And I'll talk a little about consequences this afternoon and the very important place of them in a restorative model. But if you're going to do just a little bit of it, I suggest that you just shuffle off now. You don't need to be here. But if you're interested in getting pregnant, if you're interested in making the commitment, and let's be really honest, I love this conversation I've had with family members before. I'm the oldest in my family. I've got 3 younger siblings, and sometimes I say, how do you know when you're ready to start a family? And I'm firm in the belief no one is. No one's got any idea what they are in for when they make the decision to start a family. You could have your financial ducks in a row, but you won't have your emotional in a row. You might have your emotional ducks in a row, but you've got no idea how much money it's going to cost you to have a kid. There's just so many factors that you just can't be ready for them all. So I reckon it's cool to say, I'm a bit nervous about this. There's some apprehension. There's some sleepless nights. There's some difficulty ahead, but I'm going to be up for it. I'm going to make this commitment. I'm going to cross a threshold where I'm no longer a parent now, and now I'm a parent. I'm going to take everything that comes with that because it's worthy, because the product's worth it. And I think that today, if you can just suspend some of the things that are impossible, that feel in your school like, oh, we're just not ready. If you can just say, well, what if we never were going to be? And what if the preferred future could be better as we go? If we start tomorrow, what would that look like to just go, we're taking the first step anyway? Would it be so horrible? Is the first night a sleepless one? No, there'll be some difficulties to come, but we'll get through them. If we're clear and even-minded in our head about what it is that we need to do. The return on working restoratively is not linear. And what I mean by that is some people think the graph runs a little like this. Look at my hand right there. But, if I put in 0% of the effort, I'll get 0% of the return, of course. I think maybe if I put in 50%, I'll get 50. And if I put in 100, I'll get 100. It doesn't work like that with restorative practices. It works on a curve with restorative practices. And you're not going to get the full return until you decide to be pregnant, until you decide to start a family and you cross a threshold from which there's no return. We're in, or we're out. Now, I'm going to assume that if you're still here in this webinar, that you're up for finding out what's involved in having a baby. What's involved, and I've unpacked this a few weeks ago in a video tutorial that we called RP 2.0. So what I want to do first up is just let you know that if you've seen this model for the first time, that's cool. There's a way that you can understand the syntax and the detail behind that. Send us an email address at the end of this video tutorial today. Send us an email. We'll send you the link to the video tutorial. You'll get the full gist of this. Also, if you have seen it because you've been in on previous webinars and understand what I mean by RP 2.0, I'm not going to go all the way through it today. So just hang in there with me for just a few minutes while we explain exactly what we mean by RP 2.0. And really what it's about, first of all, is saying that we're going to let this restorative philosophy impact our language. And that starts with the determination around what we call effective language, which is, I always say that I'm big on simple and short definitions. And my simple and short definition of effective language is we're going to encourage all the staff members in our schools as a starting point. We're even going to see if we can let the parents in on this as well, because that helps if they're using the same kind of words. To just change what they were already going to say by one word and adding a feelings word. And what that does is it allows our students to understand that all of the behaviours that they're exhibiting, well, vast majority anyway, are having an impact on other people around them, both positive and negative. So some people get a little hung up on the negative side of the effective language, and they say, well, you can't just be walking around telling kids that you're disappointed and frustrated and angry all day. No, you shouldn't. You should also be telling them that you're delighted and you're impressed and you're proud of these behaviours, because what it does is it allows them to join the dots on behaviours that are acceptable and are worthy and help me to be able to navigate this social system that is a school. And it allows me to learn what are the behaviours that don't. And what are the behaviours that kind of negatively impact the people who are around me who are so invested in me. It feels awful to disappoint and to let down somebody who is invested in you as a person and is trying really hard for you and cares about you. So they need to know when that happens. So the only rule that I have around effective language is pretty much just be authentic. Tell the truth. You don't need to sugarcoat your language. So if a student makes you angry, it's okay to let them know that you're genuinely angry in that moment. It's actually quite good for them to sometimes see an adult in their life who can feel anger but not lose the plot completely. And you also don't need to put mayo on it either. So no sugar, no mayo. All right. You don't need to ramp it up. So if a student kind of irks you, you're allowed to say irk. You don't have to ramp it up to anger to get full impact from it. In fact, what you do when you use emotional words that are a little bit quirky, like irk, is you add to your young people's emotional intelligence, emotional vocab, which builds their emotional intelligence, which means they're more capable of being able to participate in a restorative system. Some people say to me, restorative practice is no good with kids who don't have empathy or emotional vocab. It's great. It doesn't work as well with those students, absolutely true. It's just that the shortest route towards empathy and emotional vocab is to get restorative with them. So let's do that. The second piece around working restoratively is we want all the people in your school to be impacted in terms of the way they conduct themselves. Now, we think that there's two key ways that we need people to change the way they conduct themselves in schools. Number one is that we need them to approach conflict differently. So we need to approach it with curiosity rather than accusation. They come at it with a well-prepared process. It's pretty much just past, present, future. Let's acknowledge what's happened, but just get a gist of it. You don't need to launch what we call educational CSI. Okay? We're going to work out what the harm is in terms of people, and we're going to fix it. And as the facilitator of that conversation, our job as the adults in the school is just to support them to get the job done. Metaphorically, it's about not cleaning up the mess for them, but showing them where the mops are. And what we also need to do in terms of conduct is impact our ways of working with large groups. So I'll talk today about how leading a revolution in architecture is really important. We just want to run some circles in this school. We want to run check-in circles. We want to find out where students are at. We want to run check-out circles to find out what they've learned. We want to run preparation circles when there are changes and challenges on the horizon. We want to run response circles when something happens it's worth responding to. And we want to run learning circles. So we want our classrooms to be set up that we learn through circles together, which means that we're doing education with our students. rather than as an authoritarian at the front of the room trying to do education to our students. And then what we want to do is also impact mindset. I'll talk about that a little further. I think the best way for me to tackle that is to get to the leadership component nice and quickly, because the mindset piece is probably the most tricky to lead, but I think it's the most pivotal. The great part about working through this model is that there are implications for us to be able to have the highest level of cultural influence, which means there's pedagogical implications here. It's about teaching and learning. This isn't something you do when the kids do the wrong thing. There are philosophical implications, which means that we're actually going to change the goggles that we see our school through. We're not going to see them through the goggles of adversarial or blame-based approaches. We're going to see them through, I call it our restorative goggles, and you see things so clearly when you choose to see your school through that colour. And there are practical implications, which mean that people can start quickly. There is momentum that you can gather by getting some wins on the board, even with some teachers who might be resistant or reluctant or even a fraction recalcitrant about stepping into a restorative model. You can get progress. There's no linear way to introduce restorative practices. There's no 21 steps. There's a model that says start where you're ready. And when people get some wins on the board, some really fantastic stuff starts to happen. So where I want to take you to today is the leadership imperative that sits around, that sits kind of like an outer circle, I suppose, that sits around this inner circle of what we're looking to have happen in our school. We want this language, conduct, mindset model in place. We want to have pedagogical, philosophical and practical shifts happen. And we think that we've got RP 2.0 happening when we choose to do that. How do you lead it? How do you get it to work? So the first implications, I think, around leadership apply to the language section there. So, and there are two things that I think are important here. Number one is that we have the ambition of not only people in the inner circle impacting language, but we want to develop what we call an effective accent, which means our ambition is to get to a point where people actually just talk that way. Now, when you go to another country, if you remember that, the good old days when we're allowed to visit other countries. And I know that for me, I'm a bit of a sucker for language. Wherever I am, I tend to talk like the people where I am. So if I'm in a pub, all of a sudden I'll find myself, swearing or something where I wouldn't normally swear at that level, but if I'm, in a place of worship, I find myself talking exactly like the people are. And if I go to another country, I find myself talking very quickly in the accent of that place, because it so quickly normalizes the way that people speak. This is what we're looking for culturally, is we're looking to create an environment where young people sort of just pick up on the words that are used around them so regularly that they just start talking that way. It becomes who you are very, very quickly. So your determination around how to get that affective accent to happen in your school, the language of feelings, the language of affect being used regularly, is an ambition to get everyone to talk that way. There are two parts to that. Number one is you've got to model it. Do not put in policies and charts and documentation that we will use effective statements to deal particularly with low-level behaviours that are both positive and negative if you're not prepared to do it yourself. If you're not prepared to hack your own language system so that you can start to use effective language, maybe 10 times a day more at the start, 20 more in the second week, 30 in the third week. We're going to try and make ourselves speak that way because we know how heavily it influences the people around us. And we know that they're not going to start talking in an Italian accent the way I did in Italy, unless there are Italians around me talking in that Italian accent. We've got to be the ones that move first. The second thing we have to do around effective accent is give people practice. You have to give them language lessons. You got to become leadership Duolingo. Every single opportunity we get together, we've got to practice this. We've got to muck around with it. Your language is an informal artifact of what you believe. Informal. So the practice of this has got to be informal as well. You have to play games at a staff meeting where you get everyone for 5 minutes to stand up, grab a partner, and I want you to do a little bit of effective word boxing. So it's when we're going to shadow box like this. And if you can get 3 effective words, 3 feelings words in a row before your partner gets one in, then you get to knock them out. Figuratively, not really. So it's going to be, happy, frustrated, annoyed. If you can get 3 in before the other person just throws a little air punch as well and says disappointed, because if they block me by getting one in, I've got to come up with 3 new ones. You can't use the same word twice in the boxing match, or you're the one that gets knocked out. That's a bit of fun. It sends your staff meeting absolutely bonkers for 3 or 4 minutes, but it's practicing the accent that matters. So you're going to have to structure to make sure that your people get their Duolingo, that they get their short lesson every single day, week, whatever it is, to get that accent to occur. The second thing that you're going to need to do around language is you're going to need to speak to purpose. You're going to need to, when it comes to things like assemblies, when it comes to your communicative tools like newsletters, when it comes to parent sessions and community events, when it comes to using your apps and SMS services, when it comes to the sign out the front of your school, you've got to talk about this stuff. You've got to let them know that it matters by speaking to it over and over and over again. What this does for parents is it builds confidence in you, because what parents are looking for is for what are we going to speak about. One of my partner schools, and I love them, they're reflective, and they've given me permission to share this story. I went to one of their assemblies once, and the AP got up and spoke for about 20 minutes to an attentive parent group about all the things that had been organised for that week. Gave them a rundown of what's going on at the school that week. And they asked me, what did you think of our assembly? And I said, yeah, we just gave the parents a really big impression that all we do is organise stuff. No, we're bigger than that. We're more professional than that. We're better than that. We need to talk about what we do in 2 key areas, and these are the 2 areas that parents send their kids to school. They want a decent education. Get up and talk about teaching and learning. Get up and talk about the advances, the progress, the successes that you have in teaching and learning, and get up and talk to them about citizen building. They just want you to help them turn their kid into a decent human being. And if you can talk to how we do that, why do you do circles? Why do you speak this way? Why do you speak to conflict differently than other schools? Why doesn't there have to be a consequence every single time someone does something wrong? If you can do that, then they will have confidence that that's what you're an expert in, and they will start to want to learn from you and listen to you around that. Use big, nasty words like pedagogy. Because if you don't know what pedagogy means, you go to an expert. Who's that? You. Position yourself as an expert around learning cultures where young people become great learners and they become decent citizens. What I also want you to do is, on the conduct side of things, make 2 really key decisions here. Number 1 is that you're going to approach conflict differently. You're going to approach, as I mentioned before, you're going to approach conflict with nearly got it wrong. We're going to approach conflict with curiosity, not accusation. So if students have done something wrong and you're on yard duty, we want people to walk up and understand and have the first thing they ask, so give me a gist of what happened here, guys. Really, we just want to hear the stories. We're not going to make judgments based on those stories. We're going to give young people the opportunity to engage. We're actually going to do it with each other as well. When there's conflict, when there's difficulty, because you know what? Conflict's not bad. Conflict's fine. Conflict exists in even the most functional relationships. I'm often making the joke that, if I go upstairs from my office tonight and load the dishwasher, there'll be a bit of conflict. I don't know how to do it properly. I don't know what the rules are around that. I make mistakes. It causes frustration. We've got to sort it out. Great schools are ready. Great relationships are ready. Great relational systems are ready for that conflict. They approach it with curiosity, and they do it by deciding that we're going to go past, present, future in the way that we work, rather than launching enormous investigations that are always past-based. When we adopt a judicial system around our schools for dealing with wrongdoing, what we do is we encourage our kids to act the way that we do in a judicial system. And what genuinely happens is we lie. People tell all sorts of fibs, even in courts. They tell fibs to try and reduce the likelihood of a negative impact on myself. As adults, if you're lucky enough to be affluent enough, you'll actually outsource your lying and get someone else called a lawyer to come in and do that for you. Sorry if there's any lawyers that are watching this afternoon. We don't want to create a system that encourages people to lie. We want to create a system that encourages people to be fine about conflict and to learn their way of fixing it. The great part about a 3-step system, past, present, future, is that I've been able to teach that to year 1s. So I can make myself obsolete. They know how to fix. You've got conflict. You should do past, present, future. Oh, yeah, we should. Do you need my help? No, don't worry about it. We can do it. Awesome. You just found enough time to go and get your staffing done or whatever it is that you need to do, and not spend an hour trying to unpick what's happened between a group of year one students that are really just giving you the colour of the story that they want you to hear. And then I want you to actually think about your classroom architecture. This is really about classroom design. And it's saying, am I prepared to let restorative principles reach my pedagogy? Am I prepared to encourage people to use circles as their defaults, no matter what? Am I encouraging people to have adaptive classroom architecture that might start with a circle, but then the students spend 30 seconds getting the room set up a different way that we're going to work together, whether it's groups or rows, whatever it is that you need to do, or individual seating. But we're prepared to invest that to create a context where people are likely to succeed. Our work around circles is a fabulous way to be able to make that a reality in your school. And there's the piece here around mindset is incredibly important. I'll dwell on this for just a moment. There are probably 3 areas that I want you to, as a leader, be very cognizant of, because these are the areas that that people will criticise you for if you aren't ready, if you haven't thought this through. This is where people will sometimes look to test you and to see if you are ready. And you do really get that this restorative thing inside out. They're checking whether you're an expert. Can I trust this person enough to go with them? Do they have the answers? And the first is around, what are you attached to? And so this is about choosing that we will attach ourselves, we'll attach our interest to the process and not the outcome. The thing that I love most about restorative practices, and there are many things that I adore about working restoratively, most of it is that it makes me more effective and less stressed, which is pretty cool. The thing that I love most is I now no longer care. I lose not a wink of sleep over whether something goes well or not. Not one bit. An interaction with a student, does it go well or not? I don't know. Doesn't fuss me. Does a lesson that I teach go well or not? I don't know. Who cares? Because I'm not attaching my interest to the outcome. I'm attaching my interest to the process. Did I put the conditions in place that this student had the chance to have a win? The student had the chance to succeed. Did I give them a chance? This is really important, because as teachers, we're not great at this. Often when a class goes badly, we sort of go, well, we ask questions even as mentors sometimes of our teachers. Now, well, why do you think the class went badly? What do you think went wrong? Maybe nothing went wrong. Maybe they did every possible thing they could and it still went haywire. Have any of you ever done that? Have any of you had a lesson that you taught as a teacher that you have done everything right, but you just had the kids there in a bad place? They just weren't capable that day and things went horribly. And I reckon the flip of that is that you've also had lessons that you've taught awfully, terribly, you've sucked, and it didn't go bad. That the kids kind of cooperated enough and they let you off the hook one day. The outcome isn't the lesson. The lesson is, did I give the students a chance? Did I use circles so that they felt that we were working together? Did I approach conflict and poor behaviour choices with curiosity rather than accusation? Did I use my effective language to try and let the students know what I value and what I don't in what they're doing today? Did I speak to the importance of the lesson? Our Associate Director in charge of Teacher Education, Amy Green, is sending out a newsletter at the moment about learning intentions and success criteria. We'll be clear about what our students were supposed to do. And if I did it, good on you. Get a pat on the back. But we're looking at our process, and we're looking at our pedagogy through those restorative goggles that say, did I give the students the best possible chance? And the outcome will take care of itself. I'm just contending to you that you'll win more often. You'll be successful more often if you choose this restorative way of working. The second piece around mindset is about authority. Some people feel that when we get restorative, we're losing authority, that I'm losing power, I'm losing control in the classroom. I had a teacher one day, we talked about some of the qualities that exist in really high, really high impact, really strong relationships between teachers and students. And the literature says that one of the most powerful things that you can do to build relationships with students is to apologise, be vulnerable, be honest enough to admit it when you screw up. And I had a teacher there who sort of made, she made a noise, oh. feeling you got something you want to say, Jan. And she said, I do. She goes, I'm not going to be sitting there, when kids come in the morning and go, oh, I'm sorry you didn't get breakfast today, or I'm sorry you're in a bad mood, or I'm sorry that you think I'm the worst fucking teacher in the world. She goes, I'll just hand over all my authority to them and they won't care. They'll think they can just walk all over me. And luckily she's clearly a plain speaker, but she also is willing to give things a go. I'll give her that credit. And I said, could you run a 2-week experiment for me on it? And when we came back, I said, how'd you go with the apology experiment? She goes, yeah, it was all right. I said, what do you mean? And she goes, all right, I'm doing it. I'm going to apologize from now. I said, really, what'd you find? She goes, I'm just doing it because it works, okay? Not because I mean it. Or it's a start. Yeah, I'll take it. But we talked about what was that all about. And she said, I've realized that I'm not losing the power and the control. So even if she's giving a slightly insincere apology to her students about things that she has no control over, she's realizing that I'm not forfeiting anything to them. In fact, it's a distinction that we need to make around authority. And that is, do we want to be authoritarian in the way that we work, where we are making our students learn because we position ourselves perhaps at a high level at the front of the room. We're standing, you're sitting. And we're going to make you do the learning, and I'm going to make you do it because my badge here that I've got on my chest says I'm a teacher, and you don't have one of those badges, so I've got the power. So we're authoritarian, high level of authority. Or would we rather be authoritative, where we are still the most pivotal, the most influential factor in that learning environment, but it's because of what we do, not because of the badge. It's because of the language we use. It's because of the architecture that's in place. It's because of the way we approach wrongdoing and conflict. That positions us as a highly valuable person in that classroom that the students just don't want to disappoint. They just don't want to let you down. So choosing when it comes to authority, to want a high level of authority, but to not covet authoritarian ways of working, but to instead covet authoritative ways of working, is a really important decision as a leader that you'll need to grapple with a little bit. You'll need to grapple with it because there are assumptions that are made around leadership because of your badge, about the way that you will conduct yourself for other staff members. There's an assumption that as a leader that a problem student can be handballed up because that's your job. I'm yet to find an assistant principal job description that says I will take care of the bad kids when they play up for their teacher. Who would write that? It's not something that exists, but somehow the assumption is there that because on the org chart you are in a higher position of authority, that you must take that higher level of responsibility. I'm so proud of one of our partner schools, and this is one that our partner schools everywhere have plans for the way they're going to implement. I'll show you one of them in this video tutorial today. But Overport Primary School in Frankston were the first that I remember working with who actually put in their student engagement plan. The school leaders look to release teachers to resolve student-teacher relationship problems as a first response. Just saying wherever we can, wherever it's practicable. Instead of the student being handballed out to a school leader, the school leader will come along and say to the teacher, would you like to be able to go and chat with this one for 5 or 10 minutes and I'll watch your class? So instead of a school leader losing a whole bunch of time over trying to work out what happened, because they weren't there, they have to retrack, they let the teacher go and do that repair. It's great for the relationship. And those teachers there said, I remember one of my favourite comments, the teachers there said, we were nervous because it felt like a withdrawal of support. But they said that it was the most important thing they did, because then restorative practices became something that the leaders didn't just do, but that we all do. We got good at it, is what they said. And then third one is clear around consequences. Where do consequences fit within a restorative model? There can be grief associated for staff members who feel that working restoratively means there's no consequence. The kids are just going to be able to do whatever they like. Well, there are consequences in a restorative model. To put it really succinctly for you, they exist when there's an assessment made by a school leader that the harm is extreme, and it will take some time in order to get people in a position where that harm can be repaired. So the difference is that we don't, for instance, suspend or detain based on an offence. It's not because you punch someone and that's a level 3 behaviour and therefore level 3 behaviours are always 2 days of suspension. We don't do that. What we do is we say, what's the damage here? What's the harm? Can it be fixed now? Or do we need a spacer here? Is the harm so extreme or severe? They're the two words that I tend to use. Is it extreme and severe? And if it is, then it's appropriate to give people time so that you can actually restore and create different conditions for people by the time that they're back in each other's company again. The second way that the consequences are appropriate is when it's been agreed in advance. So you might have some sort of behaviour or contract with the student about a certain behaviour. Can I say that don't put in behavioural contracts not get in trouble or be good. Don't multiply behaviours because you're being greedy about it. Actually bring it back to just one target behaviour over this period of time. You get it right, this is what happens. We get a moment to celebrate it, and we should always do that. If you get it wrong, then this is the agreed consequence for that. And all it leaves you needing to do is to follow through on a consequence that you have negotiated with the student, thereby preserving your relationship with that student. And then the third situation is where it's the student's choice. I've had plenty of times where I've had a student who has had a blow up. I've let them calm down, maybe in a little meeting room or near my office or whatever in a classroom. Then I've gone to them with 2 post-it notes, bits of paper, and said, your call. You can miss 3 days of lunchtimes and I call your mum, or will you and I go for a walk for 25 minutes and see these 3 people that you've upset, and we'll fix it up with them. We'll make it right again. Because I'm not going to drag a student in a restorative school who refuses to, I'm not answering your stupid questions. I'm not going to take that person and put them in front of someone they've harmed to make it worse. If you want to choose the first one, that's up to you. I'm just going to do a bit of acting to let you know that the door's open. This one isn't so bad. You can choose number 2. You really can. It's not so scary. And I'll bring students in who I've worked with successfully before and say, can you show him, can you tell him that this didn't involve any blood, there was no pain, the second one's actually heaps quicker and it works and you feel good and Mr. Void ends up patting you on the back? Could you just let him know? I'll do whatever I can to eventually get them over to making a better choice, but I'm not going to drag them kicking and screaming. So some of them will choose the punitive response. Okay, I'll play the long and patient game to get you over into my world. That's where you're going to need to go to make this work. So you'll need 2 other things here. One is that you'll need an implementation bias, which means you're going to need a plan. It's not good enough to just have restorative practices training run in your school. It's all going to be about actually what happens after the training. So we talk to 4 key domains here. You will need discussion and learning opportunities, all the way back to the effective accent, how you get that to happen in your school. How are you going to resource your people to be immersed in restorative thinking? How are you going to help them to fit their restorative goggles so that they can see the world through the colour that you're seeing it through now? How are you going to get your parents on side? I'm a firm believer that your parents are either rowers or they're anchors. They're either stopping you from moving forward or they are accelerating you. And I just need more parents accelerating me than I have anchoring me. So we need to bring them on side. I used to get really frustrated. Parents, come on, this is a better way of working. The truth is they hadn't had the multiple days of restorative practices training that I had. They had had the years of implementation experience that I've had. They just happened to enroll their kid in my school. I've got to give them that reference point. I've got to talk about it, as I mentioned earlier, in newsletters, at assemblies, on signs, at key public events, using our apps. Instead of just telling them that, nagging them about, remember to bring your swimmers tomorrow or you can't get on the bus, speak to them about how we do teaching and learning and how we do citizen building. Get them on side. The yellow column in our plan is about in classrooms and playgrounds. It's really about what behaviourally are we targeting? What are we looking to shift? And the blue piece is an acknowledgement. Programming and planning is an acknowledgement that schools aren't restorative institutions alone. They're institutions of learning. They're institutions of growth. They're institutions that are compliant and accountable to their systems in some way. And we want to help. That's what we're there for restoratively. We make our schools restoratively so that it connects to our strategic plans, and we show how we can help our teachers to be able to program. So there's a really strong bias for getting things done after the training. And the second thing that we really need is some sort of public declaration where we say, this is how we do it. A one-pager, and this is an example of a student engagement plan that we built with many of our partner schools. One you can see is for wonderful school up in Kilmore in Victoria, and Assumption College, where we talk to the continuum of the way that we save time and the way that we are consistent across all of the levels of severity that can happen in our school, and indeed the way that it reaches our classrooms. We have the restorative questions. The script there is a reminder. These are the kinds of things that students will be asked when teachers come to them with curiosity and the intention to move the conversation from the past to the present to the future. The bottom right is a firm reminder around being firm and fair and our intention to reflect that way. And then the dot points there with every school, we just sit down and cobble those together. These are all the things we're going to do. These are the behaviours, these are the practices, these are the hallmarks of our conduct that we're committing to. We may not be perfect at them yet, but we're saying that this is what we stand for. And we believe that if we do everything that's on this page, those values that you can see at the top there, they can mean something. Because I'm really frustrated with schools having values that don't mean anything. And we put respect up on walls. And I asked some school leaders yesterday, do you think we've got a problem with respect in Australian schools? I said, of course we do. I said, well, just labelling it isn't working. You need a plan for conduct that allows you to manifest behaviourally that value, that allows your young people to actually draw and design a working definition that we can agree on around doing that work. Hugely important stuff. And if you can do all that as a leader, then you get your bundle of joy. You get the products that I was speaking about before. You get parents who've never been in a great relationship with the school who connect. You get students who might not access education or might not access their full potential, who do, because they want to be in that environment where they thrive and where they succeed. And you get teachers. I think that one of my great joys of implementing restorative practices was knowing that retention rates of really good teachers in my school changed. They no longer saw my school, a low SES school when I first started, as being a gateway school that you go to until you're in another school, that you really want to work in. They saw this as the place where they were able to make a genuine difference and they weren't going anywhere, which saves me some HR time at the end of the year, which is a really positive thing. I want to show you today, if I may, a school that I work with, their bundle of joy. Okay, so bear with me for a moment. What I'm going to do here is to share with you a really quick video, and I hope you enjoy what Cannock Primary School's bundle of joy looks like. The only preface that I want to put in place here is that Cannock is a school in Victoria, and they're a school that was in the top 1 percentile for violent and aggressive behaviours in their school, and in the top 3 percentile for suspensions and suspendable acts in Victoria. But this is where they're at now.
Improved the community at Cannock immensely. It's provided trust between families and us, trust between us and the students, trust in our staff, in one another. It's just benefited everybody greatly, and I'm really glad that I was part of that journey.
Real School's journey has been absolutely awesome. So many facets that have benefited from our work with Real Schools. So we're up to our 3rd or 4th year with our journey with Adam. So the learning that's taken place has been enormous in that space.
In the last 3 years, our NAPLAN results have been through the roof. So our growth in our school has been incredible. So much so that we're getting other schools asking us, what is it that's happening down there for you to achieve the results you're getting?
Over a 3-year journey, we want to improve the satisfaction level of all 3 stakeholder groups, and we've done that at Cannock. The teachers are more engaged, and even retention of staff has been a real positive at Cannock Primary School. The students, in terms of their social outcomes, as well as what they feel about the school and the climate of the school, should increase, and it has. And also the parents should feel more connected to the school.
You walk around the classrooms, you don't hear any teachers yelling, you don't hear any kids yelling. One of my daughters describes one of the teachers' classroom as having Zen qualities. Now, I've got no idea where she learned about Zen, but it accurately describes that particular teacher. He never raises his voice. He doesn't have to. To me, that's fantastic.
Had a 1, 2, 3 class this year. Lots of different age groups in that and abilities. But I must say it's probably one of the nicest classes I've had
socially, because these children have grown up with restorative practices at school. They know nothing different. And I think that has, for me, been the icing on the cake.
It's given us a framework to work in. All teachers know that system, and probably more importantly, the kids know the system. A simple system, I think, but it just works.
The children are probably getting more involved in their feelings, and they know that a teacher's there to support them.
The kids are more open to discuss their problems. Kids that you wouldn't think would do that are doing that now. So that's been really positive.
These are now kids who don't step into unhealthy conflict. They step into healthy conflict resolution. They care. They think about their behaviour before they do it, and if they screw up, they know how to fix it up, and they do it in meaningful and productive ways. It builds young people who are creative. It builds young people who have a moral compass and who know how to listen to their conscience. It's really cool to watch.
The Real Schools Partnership is a commitment that the school makes between ourselves and Real Schools. Initially, there was a series of PD sessions with staff, but where the difference comes into it is that Adam has also come in and worked with staff in the classrooms. So he's either mentored or he's taken sessions, and he's been the person that they can then learn from with him taking the session, or he's sat in the background and said, you know, next time we do this, we can do that.
It's great having the online resources there. If there's something we're not sure about or we want to get better at, like our little mini circles or check-ins, there's the videos of Adam.
The other component is that we've run parent sessions to try and educate them on the process and to bring them up to speed with what we're trying to do as a school through our partnership.
It was great to be invited to the parent sessions. Adam's so approachable. He's been a teacher, he's been a principal, he knows what works, he knows what doesn't work.
I partner with schools because it lights me up to see them get the full benefit of partnership and the full benefit of being able to focus on culture. Whenever I ask school leaders, do they think school culture is important, they put their hand up. When I ask them what it is, they get nervous. So we're not exactly sure how to define it, and if we're not exactly sure how to define it, how do we work on it? So what we provide is a vehicle for schools to be able to work on the most important part of their work, which is creating a culture where young people thrive, where teachers thrive, and where parents support you in what you're looking to try and get done. When that happens, I couldn't think of a better job on the planet to be doing.
Canada for me is a family, a community. It's a place where I put my heart and soul into. I've always come in and done that bit extra because the teachers are putting all their effort and energy into our kids. I'm happy to put energy into the school to make it a great place for the kids and the parents and the teachers, to make it an all-round great place to go. So send your kids here.
I think I'm back. I hope I've got that right. I'm really proud of them, and I'm really glad that they got their bundle of joy, that they're not, they're certainly no longer a school that's in any of those top 2 or 3 percentiles for any of those undesirable behaviours in their school. I'm just wrapped for them. I do want to point out that Chantel's put a question here, so I want to answer that question, Chantel, around when you're working with a group of students, is it okay for them to have as part of their future what they're going to do about the problem, to have a consequence in there? So it's a bit of an if answer here, Chantel. As a first response, I would say no. I would say just get them to repair the harm. Some students will tell you that they like having a consequence there and it helps them because they're familiar with that. They're familiar with the pattern. So they're telling us that I kind of trust and I know how to manipulate the old system. Where you can, the third principle of a fair process is expectation clarity. If you're seeing repeat behaviours, if you're seeing it happening over and over and over again, that's where you can say, okay, let's roll in here an agreed consequence, so that we can kind of strengthen the model a little bit. We can reinforce it rather than have it as our default. I hope that answers your question. 4 things you can do. Number 1 is I've written a book about this topic. It's called Restoring Teaching. Simon's going to put in the chat box now a link that you can use to go and buy that. There's a chapter in there around deciding to lead. So if it is something that you want if it is something that you want to lead in your school, this book will give you a notion of both the inside circle, that inner circle, but also the outer circle as well. that I think can give you a really full picture. I think you'll enjoy reading it as well, mainly because I wrote it. So, yeah, there you go. We have a mentoring program that we run annually, and it's called the Inner Circle. And so what it is 12 school leaders who come together. Each intake is only 12 people. And we start at the start of the year. And they're 12 school leaders who are implementing restorative practices in their schools. And they're getting together to share their experiences of being able to lead restorative practices. They're getting together to access a whole different level of being able to, support each other and of being able to implement restorative practices. If you are interested in being in the Inner Circle for 2021, we're already filling places in that. And like I said, there's typically only 12. So move quickly on that. If you would like me to send you the prospectus for the Inner Circle, could you do me a favour, just in the chat box, could you just put TIC? If you just put that, you're under no obligation, but if you put TIC in, we're just going to send you the prospectus for the Inner Circle, and that would have you engage with a really high level of support across 2021 to get that implemented in your school. And then we'll follow up with the chat and see where we go from there. If the Kananook story intrigued you, and Sharon, you want to link to the video, I don't know if we can get that in time today while I'm presenting, Sharon, but I'll follow up and get you the link to Kananook's amazing story. If you would like to have something like this happen for your school, then we need to talk. So all you need to do now, if benefiting from all of the little tiles that you can see on the screen right now and getting that support in your school, if you'd like to have a chat about that, then do me a favour. I can see lots of people have already put TIC in there as well already. But if you would, put the word chat in the chat box there, and we'll arrange an opportunity for us to just have a talk and just see if that's something that we feel that we can get going in your school. So just the word chat, and we'll arrange a time for us to be able to catch up. Don't worry, you don't get invoiced or anything like that for having a conversation. We're really genuine about that notion of a fit, of a good fit between what we want to do and what you're trying to achieve. And we need to explore that a little bit to see what's possible. So we'll get in touch with you after that. Thank you to the people that have already put that in place for them. And then the final thing is that the next video tutorial next Wednesday afternoon is going to be titled Resolving Conflict. So that notion that Chantel was talking about, you even say F3, I think there at once, what are we talking about there? There is some methodology, as I mentioned before, around working restoratively, particularly about the way we approach conflict and the way we deal with it and the way that we actually get something effective done as a result of it, that we can bring to your teachers. So today has been a video tutorial targeted very much at school leaders, and next week we're after your teachers. We want them, get them in. So Simon's posted the link for you in the chat box there. You can register anyone you like through that link. So copy, paste, go grab it, put it on a Word document now, email it to yourself, do whatever you need to do. And in the follow-up email that we send you via the Zoom platform, we'll also send you a registration link to come along to that. I think you'll really enjoy it. I think you get a bit out of it. And I reckon that just about does us for the day. So what I'm going to do is give you permission to leave. But what I am going to do also is just hang around for a little bit. If I've got the chat box, I've got the Q&A box open. Chantel says, I've read your book back to back, use it since it has been released and love it. Our school uses restorative practices. Oh, Chantel, you're making me cry there knowing my history at your school. That's really fabulous to know. Thank you. I'm going to hang around. If you've got any questions that you'd like to put in there over the next few minutes, you've got any comments that you'd like to put in the chat box, please do. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll talk to you again soon.